This is Chip Maxwell, and you're listening to the Retire Smart podcast with David Brooks. What is David's take on the Oracle of Omaha officially announcing his retirement at the end of 2025? And with Congress back in session, what are the prospects for the Trump tax cuts of 2017 being extended or made permanent? David Brooks has answers to these questions in today's Q&A episode. Into the Q&A we go, David. Well, the first question, as I hinted before, is about Warren Buffett. What's your take on the Oracle of Omaha officially announcing his retirement at the end of the year? And do you have any other takeaways from the annual Berkshire meeting? Well, I guess it wasn't totally a surprise. It was somewhat of a surprise, but not a shock, maybe, that Buffett announced his retirement. David, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I would say, he didn't necessarily tell the board he was doing this, obviously, and at least that's what his statement said, but I'm sure they had an inkling. The good news is he's done a great job for literally the last 10 years of laying out the succession. They kind of have their managers in the different areas, and Mr. Abel, it's kind of been known for a while, he's going to be most likely the person to get it. And the board voted literally within 12 hours of him making the announcement to solidify it. So I think it's a good to him to do it now versus wait to the end of the year, announce his retirement. In other words, so he's giving you some runway there. The other thing is we knew the stock, I've been telling clients this for years, you're going to see the stock have some kind of knee-jerk reaction when the day comes if he were to unfortunately have passed away or decides it is time to step down. And the stock was down a little over 5-6%. It was like 3% in pre-market, and then it basically doubled that during the first trading day. But in the end, that's not that big a deal, especially the gains that it's had. So I think it's great that he forecast it so that people have time to digest it before he actually steps away. The board has already validated his choice as his successor, and he will be, at least in the current form, staying on as chairman of the board, just no longer the CEO. And so you'll still have his wisdom there as much as he can contribute to it. As he said, he thinks he can bring some wisdom to the couple of key decisions. So, again, we're probably not likely to see what he's accomplished again in our lifetimes. It's certainly possible. But 60 years, he returned 5,502,000%. 5,502,000% return over 60 years. That's pretty darn amazing.
That's not bad. I got to believe that Greg Abel and everybody on the Berkshire team is so thoroughly trained in the Buffett system that there really shouldn't be too much of a drop-off or a change going forward.
No, and so, the question asked, what were the other takeaways? Well, the cash hoard's a big takeaway here. So I think I sent a graph in.
I don't know
if we've got that to put up, but basically I showed you the graph of how big their cash hoard has now. Basically, it's just a tick under $350 billion. To put that in context, Chip, take the 12 largest banks in the United States and all the reserves that they deposit overnight at the Federal Reserve. You add all that together, this is more. Bigger than the 12 largest banks' cash reserves.
Well, and not only was his cash trending upward over like the last decade, but over the last 2 years, it's basically doubled.
Well, for 10 quarters in a row now, they have been net sellers of stock, and they sold a ton of Apple, which is still their biggest holding in their most recent filing. So they have been unwinding stock. So what is telling us is they don't think that it makes sense to take capital that is guaranteed to earn them around 4.25% right now if they're buying treasuries, right? Guaranteed by the federal government to then take it and put it to risk in certain other assets, right? Businesses, et cetera. Now, there will come a point where they do see that opportunity, and that will typically be through recessions, et cetera. So they've always been wise at buying in value. What's changed over the years at Berkshire Hathaway is they used to do what I call information arbitrage, Chip. They would go find a company that maybe we didn't know how valuable that company really was. Nobody did the legwork, but that was pre-internet. That was, for decades of how he got way ahead because they did the legwork, they got in, they went and investigated, they nibbled, and they start to buy more, and then they would tell you, hey, we bought XYZ company, and then everybody else would follow along, rising that stock price. Today, information is everywhere, the internet, AI, et cetera, so it's a little harder for them to do it. So now they are ending up buying just publicly traded companies a lot now, a la their top holdings, Bank of America, Coca-Cola, Apple, et cetera. So they're sitting on this cash hoard waiting for the opportunity for these companies to get depressed or, their prices depressed down in value, and they will go in and buy things on sale. The other part of it is, I believe, part of this cash hoard is simply part of when unfortunately Mr. Buffett does pass away, there's going to be his estate plan is going to allow for large distributions to a couple of charitable trusts that for his kids will each basically be running. And I believe that they want to have cash on hand for when those shares need to get sold to do some of the philanthropy that those foundations are now being set up to do. So part of this cash hoard, I believe, in part, is probably strategic for knowing that day is at some point in our near future. But the rest of it is they're telling you they do not see a lot of opportunity out there. Now, we talked about the market value in general. I told you the market's been overvalued for a while. 5,200 was somewhat fair valued. We went down all the way down to 4,700 recently, and we may go down there again. We're above that today. But as the market sold off and was like, oh, the sky's falling. No, we just got down to more normalized pricing. And typically what they're going to do is they're going to look for worse than that, right? Pricing even below that. So if a recession comes and the market fades 15, 20, 25% down, then they'll go in there and start to buy things they think are on sale.
Well, you just reminded me that you did send the team something about the S&P 500. You know, one of the knocks on Trump's tariff policies, it's crashing the markets. Well, actually, that's not what the numbers say.
No, because the earnings estimates have come down. So, well, funny thing is, when I talked about the market being overvalued back in January, Chip, when it was making all-time high, it's actually more overvalued today than it was then because of the earnings estimates going down. In other words, if we're willing to pay a multiple of what it is, earning estimates have come way down, so therefore the stock is actually more expensive even though the price is less. Hopefully that makes sense to you at home. But this is what we do. We analyze data, and then we just want to be prudent and basically allocate capital at the opportune time, a la what Berkshire's sitting on cash for right now. They believe it's not the opportune time to put that capital to work. At some point they will feel otherwise, and you'll hear about it after the fact, and they will go in and spend some of that hard-earned capital. But to kind of just get the take of the call, I know we're spending a lot of time on this, but Warren Buffett is a legend.
It's worth it. Yeah.
So I sent out one of his quotes that I love. He's got a lot of quotes
right
out
here.
there, and basically, you know, the quote was, you know, who you associate with is just enormously important. Don't expect that you'll make every decision right on that. But you're going to have your life. You're going to have your life progress and general direction of the people that you work with, that you admire, and that become your friends. And there's the rest of the quote we can post online there. But the old adage is, you are who you spend the five people you spend the most time with. That's kind of who you end up becoming. I try to spend a lot of time, as you guys know, with friends of mine that have firms just like this in other parts of the country. I go vacation with them now. I spend time with guys because iron sharpens iron, and you're a product of those that you surround yourself. And he's just telling you, sometimes you get lucky breaks in life and what have you, but you want to surround yourself with really great people that will help you make great decisions. He tells you, Charlie Munger was the smarter of the two. He said, in various verses, but he surrounds himself with his board, all his people, and he's bragging on them. And I just think that's his legacy, is he found how to get the most out of a conglomerate. It's not just him. He wasn't just the Oracle of Omaha just pulling stock picks out of the wazoo. He's surrounded himself with a lot of smart people to make great decisions.
I've seen you practice what you are right now preaching. You are very careful in the way you put together our team at Retire Smart. We've been growing wildly. We're over 40 people now, but every hire is very carefully evaluated. David, let's shift gears now. A tax question. You and our in-house CPA, Evan Marshall, were talking about this at our recent team meeting. Congress is back in session. What are the prospects for the Trump tax cuts of 2017 being extended or made permanent?
So right now, it's about a 90% probability that they get extended. Permanent, I don't think so. I think that's less than 5% probability. And you have to understand the rules of Congress. You'd have to have a lot of Democrats vote for it, which is not currently the makeup. But with a simple majority, they can use what's called reconciliation and propose potentially deficit spending up to 10 years. We believe that the tax rates, even if they're extended for 10 years, will not stick around for 10 years. They'll stick around probably at around 2030. You're going to go through the next presidential election, and then after midterms is when the tax bill is likely to change. So we might have a window of 4 to 6 years with lower tax rates. That's what we think is going to be the case. Again, it's not set in stone, and we should know more potentially here by August, at least the current framework that we're hearing, the way they're trying to do this. And again, they didn't sell the tariffs right. I talked about that. What they were trying to do is give more tax breaks to lower income people, because that's where Trump won this election's margin by, was those making less than $100,000, a ton of blue collar folks, a ton of non-college educated folks. And so they're trying to put tax incentives in place to benefit that particular subset. And they were trying to pay for that with some tariffs. So in other words, if you have to pay 3 or 4% more for goods and services than you were a year ago, but your tax bill was cut by half or more, and you're in that income area, you have more free cash flow, right? So you're actually going to be doing better than you were, and that's what they're trying to do, is, are you going to be better off? So again, we'll see what it comes out. There's a lot of changes being written. There's even a potential to put a tax bracket on higher income earners than we currently have. That's gotten some pushback recently, but again, that's how compromise gets done. We'll see what it comes out to be.
Thank you for listening to the Retire Smart podcast with David Brooks. If you want to learn how to generate lifetime income, reduce your tax bill, and maintain your lifestyle in retirement, visit retiresmartpodcast.com. And make sure to subscribe to keep up with new episodes every week.